On Father's Day, my daughter gave her father-in-law a $13,000 cruise ticket, paid for with my money, and I got a $2 lottery ticket. She laughed, saying, "If I'm lucky, half of it is mine." I smiled, but my heart was boiling with anger. That ticket brought me $120 million, and I taught her a lesson she will never forget. Instead of half the amount, she got what she deserved. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Dad, here's your gift. If you win, remember half is mine. Kara's voice cut through the Father's Day dinner atmosphere as she tossed the lottery ticket across my dining table with that familiar smirk. I caught the crumpled paper, my weathered fingers smoothing it against the tablecloth. $2. The numbers blurred slightly as I stared at them, trying to process what had just happened. "Very thoughtful, sweetheart," I managed, forcing a smile. "This is—" "Oh, but wait!" Kara interrupted, her voice rising with theatrical excitement. "I haven't given Eric his gift yet." She reached behind her chair and produced an elegant gift box, the kind that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The ribbon alone looked expensive, shimmering under my simple dining room light. Eric straightened in his chair, his perfectly pressed shirt catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through my small windows. My daughter's father-in-law had the kind of confident posture that came from never worrying about money. "These," Kara announced, lifting the cruise tickets from their silk-lined box, "cost $13,000. Eric deserves the best for everything he's done for our family." The weight of the lottery ticket in my hand suddenly felt microscopic. I watched Eric examine the tickets with satisfaction, his manicured fingers tracing the gold embossing. "Now this is what I call a proper gift, Kara," Eric said, his voice carrying that particular tone of approval reserved for expensive things. His eyes met mine across the table. "Your father taught you well." The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Other family members shifted uncomfortably, suddenly finding their plates fascinating. My sister Margaret cleared her throat, while my nephew Tommy studied his hands. "Dad always said actions speak louder than words," Kara replied, her laugh bright and sharp. She glanced at Eric and something passed between them, a look that made my chest tighten. "Some people show love through grand gestures. Others—" She gestured vaguely at my lottery ticket. I held the paper steady, though my hands wanted to shake. "I appreciate the thought, Kara, really." "Oh, it's just a little joke," she said, waving dismissively. "But seriously, if you hit the jackpot, I expect my cut. I paid for it, after all." Eric chuckled, the sound low and satisfied. "Perhaps next year Stephen will surprise us all with something more substantial." The afternoon sunlight highlighted every uncomfortable expression around my table. Margaret's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Tommy's wife Sarah studied the family photos on my walls with sudden intensity. Even my grandson Jake, usually buried in his phone, looked up with confusion. "These cruise tickets," Eric continued, fanning them out like playing cards, "represent 2 weeks in the Mediterranean. First-class accommodations, private balcony, all meals included. The kind of experience that creates lasting memories." I nodded, my throat tight. "Sounds wonderful." "It is wonderful," Kara agreed. "Eric has always been there for us financially. He helped us buy our house, paid for Jake's private school, even covers our country club membership. He's earned something special." The lottery ticket felt like it might disintegrate in my grip. I remembered the double shifts I'd worked at the garage, the overtime hours fixing transmissions and rebuilding engines, all to pay for Kara's college education. The nights I'd fallen asleep in my chair, too tired to make it to bed, after working 16-hour days to afford her textbooks. "Well," I said quietly, "I hope you both enjoy the cruise." "We will," Eric said, slipping the tickets back into their box with ceremonial care. "This is how families should treat each other, with generosity and respect." The conversation moved on, but I remained focused on the tiny piece of paper in my hands. $2, the same amount I used to give Kara for ice cream when she was 7, back when that small gesture could light up her entire face. After dinner, they left as quickly as they'd come. Car doors slammed outside, engines started, and voices faded into the evening air. I remained at my table, still holding the lottery ticket, watching the last of the sunlight disappear from my dining room. The house settled into the familiar quiet of my solitary life. I looked around at the family photos on my walls, The modest furniture I'd bought piece by piece over the years. The careful decorations I'd set up for a Father's Day that was already over. The lottery ticket lay beside my empty coffee cup, forgotten in the morning light filtering through my kitchen window. I stared at my laptop screen, numbers swimming before my eyes as I reviewed my monthly bank statement. A ritual I'd maintained for 40 years, first as a young father counting every penny, now as a careful retiree protecting what little I had. My finger traced down the list of transactions, utility bills, grocery store purchases, the modest amount I'd spent on Father's Day dinner ingredients. Everything accounted for, everything expected, until I reached a line that made my coffee grow cold in my mouth. Premium travel services, 13,643. I blinked, certain I'd misread. The amount stared back at me, unchanged. My hands trembled as I cross-referenced the date with my calendar. 1 week ago, Thursday. I'd been nowhere near a travel agency. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Kara still had authorized access to my account, a precaution I'd set up years ago when her mother died, in case of emergencies. I'd forgotten about it completely. My phone felt heavy in my shaking hands as I dialed her number. Each ring echoed in my quiet kitchen, mixing with the sound of my own heartbeat. "Hello, Dad." Her voice carried that particular tone of bored politeness she used when I interrupted her busy life. "Kara, I'm looking at my bank statement." I tried to keep my voice steady. "There's a charge for over $13,000 from premium travel services." Silence. Then a laugh, light and dismissive. "Oh, that? I bought Dad Eric his cruise. He deserved something nice for once." The words hit me like a slap. You took $13,000 from my account without asking?" "I didn't take anything, Dad. I used family money for a family gift." Her tone shifted, becoming slightly defensive. "You wouldn't have spent it anyway. It's just sitting there." "Kara, that's theft." My voice broke on the word. "You stole from me." "It's not stealing when it's family money," she snapped. "Eric has always been there for us financially. He helped us when we needed it. This is just returning the favor." I gripped the phone tighter. "I'm your father, Kara. I raised you. I worked double shifts to pay for your college, And Eric helped us both move beyond that," she interrupted. "He's shown us what real success looks like, what it means to be generous, to live well, to give meaningful gifts instead of—" She paused, and I could hear her dismissive sigh. "Instead of lottery tickets." The cruelty in her voice left me speechless. This was my daughter, the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap while I read her bedtime stories, the teenager who'd cried on my shoulder when her mother died, the young woman who'd once called me her hero. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here," I whispered. "Look, I know you're upset, but think about it rationally. Eric earned this. He's successful. He's contributed to our family's well-being. He deserves recognition for everything he's done." "And what about everything I've done?" Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "You did what fathers are supposed to do. Eric went above and beyond." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the dial tone echoing in my empty kitchen like a funeral dirge. My hands shook as I set it down, the same hands that had held her as a baby, taught her to ride a bike, applauded at her graduation. I walked to my nightstand and grabbed the lottery ticket, the $2 joke she'd thrown at me like scraps to a dog. Even this pitiful gift had been bought with my own stolen money. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. Instead, I crumpled the ticket in my fist and marched to the kitchen trash can. The paper made a satisfying thud as it hit the bottom, joining the coffee grounds and empty cans that represented my simple, apparently worthless life. The house felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer together. I needed air, needed to move, needed to be anywhere but in this place where my daughter's betrayal echoed off every surface. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, my legs carrying me down the familiar streets of my neighborhood. The morning air was crisp, filled with the sounds of suburban life, lawnmowers starting up, children playing, neighbors calling greetings across fence lines. Mrs. Patterson waved from her garden, her arthritic hands gentle with her tomato plants. "Beautiful morning, Stephen." "Yes, it is," I replied automatically, though the day felt anything but beautiful. I walked past the Henderson house, where Tom was teaching his grandson to throw a baseball. The boy's laughter carried on the breeze, pure and uncomplicated. I remembered teaching Kara the same way, her small hands gripping the ball with determination, her face bright with joy when she finally made a perfect throw. When had that changed? When had my love become insufficient, my life something to be ashamed of? The questions followed me down Maple Street, past the corner market where I'd bought Kara candy as a child, past the park where she'd played on summer afternoons. Every memory felt tainted now, viewed through the lens of what she'd become. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe Kara had reconsidered. Maybe she'd realized what she'd done. "Dad, I talked to Eric about the money situation. He thinks you're overreacting. It's not like you needed it for anything important. We'll pay you back when we can. Maybe for Christmas. Kay." I stopped walking. Read the message again, then a third time. When we can. As if $13,000 was pocket change. As if my financial security was negotiable. As if I should be grateful for the possibility of eventual repayment. The phone rang before I could respond. My sister Margaret's name appeared on the screen. "Stephen, are you okay? Kara called me, said you were upset about some money thing. She stole $13,000 from my account, Margaret." The words came out flat, emotionless. "To buy her father-in-law a cruise." Silence. Then, "She what?" "She still had access to my account. She used it to buy Eric a $13,000 cruise for Father's Day. She gave me a $2 lottery ticket and told me half the winnings were hers." "Jesus," says Stephen, "are you sure? Maybe there's some mistake." "She admitted it. Said it wasn't really stealing because it was family money." I laughed bitterly. "She said Eric deserved it because he's been generous to them. Unlike me, apparently." Margaret's voice softened with the kind of sympathy that made my chest ache. "Stephen, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she'd become so... I don't even know what to call it." "Cruel," I said simply. "She's become cruel." We talked for a few more minutes, Margaret offering to come over, to call Kara herself, to help however she could. But there was nothing she could do. Nothing anyone could do. My daughter had shown me exactly what I meant to her, and no amount of intervention could change that truth. I walked home slowly, my legs heavy with exhaustion that had nothing to do with physical exertion. The house felt different when I entered. Smaller, shabbier, marked by the kind of poverty that comes from being seen through someone else's dismissive eyes. The trash can in my kitchen held the crumpled lottery ticket, a reminder of the joke that had started this whole nightmare. I stared at it for a long moment, remembering the weight of those $2 in my hand, the laughter in Kara's voice as she tossed it across the table. Tomorrow, I would call the bank. I would revoke her access to my account, take the steps I should have taken years ago. But tonight, I would sit in my quiet house and mourn the daughter I'd lost, the relationship that had died somewhere along the way without my noticing. The lottery ticket remained in the trash, forgotten and worthless, while I grieved for something far more valuable that I'd already lost. But the next morning arrived with the kind of brutal clarity that follows a sleepless night. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold as I stared at the bank's phone number written on a piece of paper. My hands felt steady for the first time in 24 hours. "First National Bank Customer Service, this is Rebecca. How can I help you?" "I need to revoke authorized access to my account," I said. "Someone has been making unauthorized purchases." The conversation was surprisingly simple. Rebecca's voice carried professional sympathy as she walked me through the process. Within 15 minutes, Kara's access was terminated, new security measures were in place, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the solid certainty of protecting myself. "Is there anything else I can help you with today, Mr. Woods?" "No, that covers it. Thank you." I hung up and looked around my kitchen with new eyes. The modest space felt different, not shabby but honest, clean, mine. My gaze fell on the trash can, and I remembered the lottery ticket lying crumpled among the coffee grounds, the $2 joke that had started this whole mess, purchased with my own stolen money and thrown back at me like I was some kind of charity case. I walked over and stared down at the crumpled paper. Even this pathetic gesture had been bought with money taken from my account without permission. The irony was almost laughable. She'd stolen from me to buy me a gift, then claimed half the potential winnings. With sudden, decisive anger, I grabbed the ticket and smoothed it out on my counter. The numbers stared back at me. 807, 14, 23, 35, 42. Powerball 18. I memorized them, these digits that represented everything wrong with my relationship with my daughter, then crumpled the paper again and threw it back in the trash with more force than necessary. The morning stretched ahead of me, empty and quiet. I needed to move, needed to clear my head, needed to be somewhere other than this kitchen where yesterday's betrayal still echoed off the walls. I grabbed my jacket and headed outside, letting my feet carry me down the familiar streets of my neighborhood. The morning air was crisp, filled with the sounds of honest work. Lawn mowers starting up, children playing, neighbors calling greetings across fence lines. Mrs. Patterson was in her garden again, her weathered hands gentle with her roses. She looked up as I passed, her smile warm and genuine. "Morning, Stephen. You're out early today?" "Couldn't sleep," I said, pausing at her fence. "Thought a walk might help." She nodded knowingly. "Sometimes the best thinking happens when your feet are moving." My Harold used to say that. Her late husband had been a good man, a mechanic like me who'd worked with his hands and treated people with respect. The kind of man who understood that character mattered more than bank accounts. He was right about that, I said. I continued walking past the Henderson house where Tom was washing his car with his grandson's help. The boy was more interested in splashing water than cleaning, but Tom didn't seem to mind. Their laughter carried on the breeze, uncomplicated and pure. 2 blocks down, I passed the corner market where I'd bought Cara candy as a child. The owner, Mr. Chen, was arranging fruit in his window display, each apple and orange placed with care. He'd been here for 30 years, serving the neighborhood with quiet dignity, never getting rich, but never compromising his principles either. These people understood something Cara had forgotten, that there was honor in honest work, in treating people with respect, in building relationships based on something more substantial than financial gain. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe Cara had reconsidered. Maybe she'd realized what she'd done. "Dad, I talked to Eric about the money situation. He thinks you're overreacting. It's not like you needed it for anything important. We'll pay you back when we can. Maybe for Christmas." "Kay." I stopped walking, read the message again. The casual dismissal of my financial security, the assumption that $13,000 was somehow unimportant to me, the vague promise of eventual repayment. It all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. This was who she had become. This was what I meant to her. I deleted the message without responding and kept walking. The familiar streets of my neighborhood wrapped around me like a comfortable blanket, filled with the sounds and sights of people living honest lives. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms, with my dignity intact. The trash can in my kitchen held the crumpled lottery ticket, forgotten and worthless, while I walked toward whatever came next, with my head held high. 3 days had passed since I'd taken control of my finances. 3 quiet days of morning coffee, simple meals, and the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done the right thing. I was stirring scrambled eggs in my cast-iron skillet when the phone shattered the silence with its